All right, everyone, it's time for the occult, video number 423, military occultism. I've spoken with a lot of people from militaries around the world, and there's also a historical backstory to this. Occultism has for a very long time been tied with military affairs. For example, in a literary tradition, the concept of the fortune-telling oraculum which was supposedly used by various generals and so forth. Napoleon is most often mentioned. That literary tradition continues for well over a century, actually, after Napoleon's death. It was also linked to the Prussians. It was linked to Thomas Jefferson, although there is one potentially extant work that I've heard of. I saw it listed on the back of another book, actually, that I was editing, and it was Jefferson's Oraculum. It's probably about the same as the other works, but I could never find anything else about it. So fortune telling is definitely big in the military. I wrote a work, for example, years ago on occultism in sports. So the fact that the different teams and their brands and so forth were associated with different occult ideas and that it informed literally what would happen with the superb owl, the Super Bowl, year after year. I should probably update that because I think there's been 7 Super Bowls since then. And that was more of humorous work than anything else because, of course, I don't actually believe that who wins the Super Bowl informs what's going to happen with the nation. That's not part of my occult forte. But I thought it was funny, and it roughly mirrors the military, actually. For instance, people in sports. You've got a winning streak, say you don't change your socks. If a military unit has a winning streak, they've been in several battles and they've all come out well, you see similar behavior, similar behavioral patterns. The military is highly superstitious. The rigor and almost ritualism of a military unit, the cohesiveness, the sort of brotherhood-ishness, dates back a very, very long time. We're talking long, long ago. For instance, in ancient Rome, there was the cult of Mithra that was very popular among military members. The cult of Mithra, of course, espousing kind of pseudo-Christian views at times, or pseudo-Judaistic, also crossed over with, traditional elements of Roman paganism. All of these religions inform each other and basically commit, religious incest with one another over time anyway. Roman military cults were a thing. And the same thing was true of the Assyrians, who took over for other groups and were much more militaristic. You see the exact same sort of things over and over throughout time. It's said, for example, you don't find atheists in foxholes. I don't know that that's actually true. I'm sure that there are people that are in there wondering if they're about to get brained and they truly don't believe in a deity or something like that or an afterlife. I'm sure that that does actually happen. But I think that it is not particularly commonplace. I have to agree with the goddamn evangelicals on this one. However, I would point out that the religion or deification or superstitions that they engage in are not always Christian. So, yeah, they're Catholics and Protestants, but there are also Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, pagans, Jews, and so forth. And within the military context, when you are being fired upon by mortars and shit like that, and hey, at any given moment, I could blink out of existence. I'll just get completely vaporized by a rocket or something like that. Would be a little bit harder not to have some sort of spiritual view, admittedly so. I'm highly spiritual, I'm just not religious or theistic myself. So the military has long been tied with occultism, from the ancient cults up through the fortune-telling, the oraculum era, as I tend to call it. I've edited 6 or 7 different works just on that particular topic, most of which are ascribed to Napoleon more than anything else. Although I think there was one that was dedicated to Hindenburg. The idea was that his military successes were also the result of magic, effectively. up into the modern era with superstitions that persist to this day. Of course, technically speaking, even when they're praying over their rifles or something like that, technically that's an invocation, an incantation. Look at the Nazis. Nazis were a great example. Himmler was obsessed with the occult. I touched on this in a previous video. There's a famous line in Indiana Jones where they're querying him. This is the first one, of course. Um, and they're querying him with regards to, the location of the temple. The Nazis are trying to find it. They're trying to find the Ark of the Covenant, effectively. And there's a line in there where they say Hitler is insane. He's obsessed with the occult. Or I believe that's the line. It actually wasn't Hitler. He didn't believe in these things. In fact, expunged the movements, the Volkish movements that were practicing elements of Germanic paganism. It was Himmler that was obsessed with the occult. That's why you have the Black Sun and all of these things. He was an avid book collector, had been a chicken farmer beforehand. Interesting individual who actually apparently freaked old Adolf out. Adolf called him a radical. Like, yeah, you're taking it too far. When Adolf Hitler thinks that you're too racist, you're probably too racist, just saying. But the Nazi regime was Twain in that sense with the occult. The Ahnenerbe, for example. They overlapped archaeology and biology and the other sciences, especially the physical sciences, with spiritual facets. And Himmler was apparently a taskmaster and would randomly tell you to do random shit that he just got in his head simply because he had a dream or something like that. Totally believable. He pissed Adolf off at the end and ended up stripped of his position, actually. It's a very, very funny backstory that most people know nothing about. But as far as the military goes, look at the US military. What do the things that are on their patches symbolize? If you concord them to any reasonable Western occult path, you'll see exactly what I'm seeing right now. You can do that research on your own. It's very, very difficult to miss once you know what you're looking for. The military is absolutely a magical operation as much as it is a physical operation, actually. This goes for every military, by the way, in the world. Look at, for instance, North Korea. What does the military there, on paper at least, technically believe? They believe that dear leader was born under a rainbow and with unicorns and stuff like that. Now, of course, this is not taken fully seriously, but they've still got to have some standard to believe in. And so they have their own form of spirituality, and it's overlapped, of course, with ancestor worship and things like that. Tends to be fairly common in Eastern Asia, certainly common in places like Japan, although they treat their old people like shit now, unfortunately, for the most part. You have the emperor's cult, bringing up Japan as a great example. The concept was that the emperor was effectively a deity. The emperor wasn't simply a civic leader. The emperor was effectively a god. We've seen this in multiple cultures, by the way, throughout the times. In ancient Northern Europe, people would use psychotropics, and you've heard of the term berserker, probably. The Vikings and other groups would use psychedelic mushrooms and or other substances, probably a lot of alcohol as well, before going into battle. This was a libation, actually, more than anything else. The concept of the afterlife as well is noted in the same way. When we talk about militaristic groups and their association with drug use, spirituality, and so forth, we can't forget that most religions also have the same basic afterlife premise. Oh, it's a giant meat hall. Oh, there are rivers of wine, says Islam, and so forth. A lot of drinking involved with these people, too. People like their alcohol, just saying. Military occultism, though, these days is much more on the superstitious level. So people will carry good luck charms. I did as a kid, not in the military, obviously, but I had a little quartz crystal that I carried with me. Unfortunately, I lost it. Very, very sad. Also lost my Captain Planet ring. I was really cut up about that, by the way. Um, in the military, you're going to find that the majority of people that are there have some sort of superstition. They carry some sort of charm. They carry some sort of object that makes them stronger, so to speak. It's very, very common. In fact, I don't think that I've talked to anyone in the military that doesn't engage in such behavior. It might be all of them. Anything that can help when you're being shot at, probably you should engage in that behavior. Will it work? Maybe. Is it better than nothing? Yeah. At the very least, it's giving you the psychological strength to go on when you're carrying 100 pounds through a 100-degree jungle well under sniper fire. And so I have a feeling that around the world, pretty much everyone in the military, in their country, they engage in such behavior. They have such beliefs. They may be more laissez-faire or they may be more serious. It depends on how ritualistic they are generally, but they have the beliefs. Any military members, by the way, who want to opine in the comments section, you are more than welcome to do so. That's about all. Peace out.